This is the CitizenLink Report.
If you find our insights helpful, would you support our video efforts? Your gift of $25 or more goes a long ways. Covers the crew, lights, cameras, all that. Just click on Donate. Thanks from all of us. The headlines show the fallout from the Supreme Court's wrong decisions on marriage. What's all this leading to? This is the CitizenLink Report. Hi, I'm Stuart Shepard, along with Tom Minnery, our Executive Director. Hi, Tom.
Hello, Stuart.
Tom, you were not with us last week, but you were actually working. You were hanging out with folks from our family policy councils around the country. Give us a brief update on that.
Well, hang out is not exactly the word. We were putting the collected state representatives from 33 of our 37 family policy councils through a lot of conference agenda items, speakers on issues on organizational development, trying to impact the strength of the family policy councils.
And give us just a one-sentence description of what they are. What do they do?
State-based public policy professionals who are the watchmen on the wall for the family in state capitals around the country, independently financed and governed, but closely associated with focus on the family and CitizenLink.
A lot of great men and women around the country doing a lot of great work too. We'd encourage you, if you go to citizenlink.com, at the top there's a little link for state groups. If you click on that, it'll show you a map that shows what states those are in. Mm-hmm. All right, let's talk about the marriage decisions. First, just your reaction overall to what happened last week.
Very disappointed,
yeah.
Obviously, particularly in the decision to overturn Proposition 8, which is the amendment, constitutional amendment in California. Twice now the people of California have said, we believe marriage is as God intended, one man, one woman. And still the courts, from state courts all the way up through the Supreme Court, found a way to say otherwise.
What's all this leading to? I mean, everybody's kind of watching the headlines, and we're seeing that the federal government is quickly taking advantage of what happened with DOMA. As you know, the Obama administration refused to defend the Defense of Marriage Act, and that's what set all this up as it came down the road. Carrie Gordon Earl, who works with us, referred to the administration using this as policy taffy that they will stretch as far as they possibly can.
Well, first of all, to say what this means going forward, we should say what it does not mean. There is no Roe v. Wade decision applying to marriage. That's what our opponents had hoped. That is to say, they hoped the court would say there was a constitutional right to same-sex marriage. As the court said in 1973, there's a constitutional right to abortion. That did not happen. And so the 38 states that declare marriage as one man, one woman, that public policy is still in force, still in effect. So most of the country still has one man, one woman as its definition for marriage. That is not being told to you by secular media, but that's important for you to know.
Now, those who brought the challenges argued that this was a civil right, that this was equivalent to the civil rights movement of the 60s. The court did not accept that argument. That's significant as well.
Well, it is. The court offers a special, strict scrutiny whenever a case involving race comes to the court. Racism is not liked in this country, obviously, and so the court regards those cases very, very seriously, and anyone who wants to prove the opposite side of a charge of racism when it gets into the federal courts has to have a higher burden of proof. Not so with homosexuality. The court continues not to say that homosexuality is akin to racism or ethnic background.
Now, that being said, there are government officials in courts around the country that are treating this as a super right, if you will, that would trump the First Amendment rights of the free exercise of religion and also free speech. What do you think is happening there?
Well, that moves from the question of whether homosexuality is like race to the question of whether homosexuality, that is to say sexual rights, trump religious rights, which is the first right protected in the Bill of Rights in our U.S. Constitution. That's the future of this battle. The question is not in those states which have same-sex marriage, will they continue to have same-sex marriage? Yes, they will until the people vote it out again. The question is, for those of us who respectfully decline to celebrate same-sex marriage, well, we have the right to do so. Not just me, Tom Minnery, but Me, a baker of wedding cakes, me, a florist who likes to decorate churches for weddings, do I have the right to politely decline based on my sincerely held religious belief?
So far, the answer has been no, you're going to be dragged to court.
Well, court, or more likely a civil rights commission composed not of legal people but of political people who are quick to declare those who want to dissent from these kinds of activities to be in foul of somebody's civil rights. Those do get into court, and so far the courts are ruling in the favor of the bakers and the florists so far.
One way to push back against this is through something called a Religious Freedom Amendment. Tell us what that's about.
Well, there are religious liberty protections that 18 states now have in law or in their state constitution. We have a list of those up on the screen. So what we have to do is to be sure that all states have adequate religious liberty protections. Now, those will be fought against, because if a state is armed with a state law declaring that people who want to respectfully decline from participating in these same-sex marriage ceremonies, if they want to have that right, then the state law has to declare that they do have that right. So there's a lot of work ahead in protecting people according to their religious beliefs, state to state.
I have friends who have said, boy, this just shows me that there's no sense being involved in the system. The courts are just going to undo any advances that we make. They're full of liberal justices that are going to flip this on its head when it gets to the final measure. The challenges to the Health and Human Services regulations under Obamacare, not to take this too far afield from the topic today, but the challenges to that are showing what can happen when courts act properly.
Well, yeah, but let's go back to your original question.
Yeah.
Does it matter if I vote, because the courts are going to do what the courts are going to do? Well, we just said the courts did not do what our opponents wanted them to do, which was to declare a constitutional right to same-sex marriage, thereby kicking out all of those state laws declaring marriage as one man, one woman. So it does matter. California, the people voted twice for traditional marriage, and the courts found a way to undo that. I think California is an outlier, being California, being part of that radically leftist Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, which is no friend to traditionalism in any topic. But back to the question of religious liberty, and you raised the HHS regulations. Yes, there is hope ahead. We have some 60 lawsuits that have been filed by both nonprofit and for-profit companies trying to exempt themselves from a requirement that their health care for employees includes payment for abortifacient drugs, that is to say, drugs that prevent abortion. So far, the record is pretty good. Now, of the 30 for-profit companies that have filed suit, so far the courts, at least preliminarily, have sided with them in about 20 cases, and 7 of them have been in opposition, and the others haven't been decided yet. Most of the nonprofit organizations, the very reputable Christian colleges, universities, organizations that have filed suit, these cases will have to be refiled after August 1st, when the final regulations requiring those abortifacients in healthcare policies are passed by the Obama administration, when are declared to take effect by the Obama White House. So much more litigation ahead, but so far there's an encouraging sign that the courts do respect religious liberty.
Now, you're emphasizing then it's important to keep voting. It's important for us to be knowledgeable and active, but it's also important for us to be engaged, to go outside of just voting, but also organizing those around us to get them out to vote and to vote, if you will, the right way that will influence these issues for the years ahead.
You know, we had a massive voter registration campaign in 2012. And what we found is what we have found before. Pro-family voters, when we can get them registered, when we can get them to understand who to vote for, who not to vote for, and we don't do that through Focus, but through CitizenLink, they will vote in higher proportion than do average voters. So our side, so to speak, has tremendous muscle, much of it not being used. When you think of the 2012 presidential election and you realize that only about 57% of those potentially eligible to vote voted, there's a huge group of people who could have turned that election and any election to our side if they voted correctly. So there's a lot of work to be done.
And that explains in part why we do this. It's because what we've discovered is when people understand what the issues are and what the outcomes could be with a little nudge here and there, they tend to be more involved because they realize we actually can make a difference in the outcome here.
Oh yes, and I wish one day we had the opportunity to go state by state through the wonderful state laws passed by legislatures that have been improved by politicians who have been elected by pro-family voters. We see wonderful things all around the country. We'll have to do that one day.
And that's how we can influence elected officials, legislation that's passed. There's another aspect to this, and that's the courts. As we look over the next decade, the next 2 decades, what we really need is to see a shift in the judiciary, a shift in who's sitting on these panels that decide the outcomes of these cases. And that I want to give you a chance just to speak to young people who are considering perhaps a future as an attorney, as a profession in law. What encouragement would you have for them looking way down the road?
I would say the encouragement I have is 3 words: Alliance Defending Freedom. Those are our close allies who take religious liberty cases to court, who have a large staff of professional litigators, that is to say courtroom attorneys, and a huge group of allied attorneys around the country who work in other areas of law but occasionally take on religious liberty cases. That work is growing, and a lot of law school students from first-tier law schools are now involved in the Blackstone Fellowship, which is all about training promising law students and encouraging them to become judges down the road. I mean, that's not the sole purpose of Blackstone, but a lot of law school students are saying, well, gee, maybe I'd like to be a judge. Maybe I would like to have the opportunity to rule on the Constitution as it was written, not as left-leaning politicized courts who want to rule on it. So there is, for young people in law schools, Alliance Defending Freedom has a lot for you, and you can do a search and find your way quickly to the Alliance Defending Freedom organization online.
All right. Thank you, Tom. Appreciate your insights this week.
You're welcome.
And thank you for watching. We've been hearing from quite a few of you through your emails. We appreciate your comments, your insights. Some of the questions we talked about today are ones that you've sent in, and that's helpful to us to find out what's on your mind so that we can talk about the things you want to talk about. So do write to us at mail@citizenlink.com. Take a moment today, and for that matter this week and for the rest of the year, to pray for those young people, young Christians who are considering a future in the profession of law. Young men and women who are highly capable, who can understand the Constitution the way the founders intended, who could help reshape the future of our country. Pray for them, pray for their encouragement and for their career goals. And remember, stand tall and be heard.